Lisette was just talking about the storm surge, and that's really what we keep hearing will most likely be the biggest impact of Irma, and it's in part, or mostly, the reason why all these evacuations have been ordered across South Florida and Miami-Dade County. That's zones A, B, and parts of Zone C. Because of that, they're going to be opening additional shelters. 8 of them were open last night. Today, we're expecting to hear that 13 more will open. And from emergency managers later this morning, we expect to hear exactly where those are. Yeah, and right now, Gary Nelson is standing by at the Emergency Operations Center in Dade County. He will, of course, brief us with what he knows, and we will turn over to the mayor of Miami-Dade County whenever he arrives there ready to speak. Gary, what's the latest from the EOC?
Well, the latest continues to be prepare, prepare, prepare. If you have not made your evacuation plans yet, make them and carry them out now. If you go to a public shelter, and that is the choice of last resort, but if you do go to a public shelter, remember that you should not come empty-handed. When you go to that shelter, you're going to find a storm-proof and storm surge-proof room. And that is it. You need to bring your own bedding with you. You need to bring a 3-day supply of food. You need to bring a 3-day supply of water with you to the shelter for every person and pet. If you're going to the pet shelter that's currently opened over at the Youth Fairgrounds in West Miami-Dade County. So don't expect to arrive at the shelter and find food and water and cots and all that. It's not there. It won't be until after the storm has passed and the Red Cross, which is operating all these shelters, by the way, in cooperation with the county, is able to bring supplies in, to truck supplies in, and then you'll have a cot to sleep on, you'll have water to drink, you'll have food to eat until you are able to return to your home. The assumption being that folks aren't going to be able to return to their homes immediately after this storm passes. So far, 12 shelters open in Miami-Dade County. It's expected that another dozen or so are going to be open today, and we're going to get an announcement on that before too much longer. Let's talk about electricity for a moment. Remember Hurricane Andrew? Many of you were not born 25 years ago for Hurricane Andrew, or were not here, don't recall. But I know that I was a good 3 weeks without electricity down in what is now Palmetto Bay following Andrew. Many people went much longer than that without power. There was a great hue and cry raised after Andrew and then subsequently after Wilma and Katrina about the power being out. And why in the world did it take FPL in so many cases so long to get the power restored? Well, the fact of the matter is they had an old, worn out system, poles, wooden poles that were old, weakened from rot and water and weather exposure and the like. And FPL got a wake-up call, excuse me, and have spent upwards of $3 billion strengthening their system. That's great news, right? Well, no, not when you're talking about a hurricane like Irma. And Florida Power and Light is warning Floridians, not just here in South Florida, but perhaps in other areas of the state now. Be prepared, not just for the lights to go off, but perhaps for the lights to go off for a long time. I had a conversation with the president and chief executive officer of Florida Power and Light here at Miami-Dade's Emergency Operations Center, and here is how he bluntly assessed what this storm may bring. Let's listen.
The storm has the potential to be as devastating or more so than Andrew. And at these kind of winds, even the equipment that we have installed, the $3 billion we've invested, is subject to actually having to be replaced, not just repaired. 185 plus mile an hour winds can break concrete poles. People need to be prepared that there could be prolonged outages, particularly if we're replacing and rebuilding rather than just repairing.
Now, did you hear what the man had to say? rebuilding, not just repairing. So we're talking about the possibility of a storm that can just destroy facilities, devastate facilities that will have to be not patched back together, but rebuilt. Some in the FPL organization say, depending on just what Irma does, depending on the amount of power she wields when she comes across the state, there could be some who are months without electricity in the wake of this weather incident. So you need to be prepared for that. You need to be prepared for some considerable misery after this storm has passed. We hope this won't happen. We hope that Irma, which is already, when I did that interview with the FPL president, he was talking about those 185-mile-an-hour winds. I think Lissette most recently was talking about 155-mile-per-hour winds. Still incredible. Those are Andrew-esque winds, of course. So we can still hope that there's not going to be the overwhelming destruction of the electrical grid that might occur, but we've got to be prepared if in fact that does occur, and you may have to be looking at not just days perhaps, but maybe weeks, and in some cases, depending, months without electricity. FPL's $2.5 to $3 billion investment in improving its infrastructure over the last decade or so, notwithstanding. We continue to stand by here at the Emergency Operations Center, waiting for Mayor Carlos Jimenez to bring us up to date in terms of new shelter openings and that sort of thing. Also, one thing that the Red Cross wanted us to point out regarding shelters is this. If you check into a shelter, you can't check back out. It's not like going into a hotel then going out for dinner. Once you check into a shelter, you are checked in. If you leave, you would have to check in all over again. And if you have particular issues that need to be dealt with, you'd have to go through all of filling out all of those forms and whatnot. So once you've checked into that shelter, you're there. You're there for the duration. And it's expected that as perhaps 70,000 people eventually are in fact going to take that shelter of last resort, one of these public shelters that will be opening in Miami-Dade County. And as they are announced, you don't want to wait until tomorrow evening when the weather is really deteriorating to go, when traffic is going to be bad, because it will be, because there are going to be a lot of people who do in fact wait. Go ahead, and it's best to be early and not get risk of getting stuck out there somewhere, delayed in some way.